Welcome everybody to day 2 of the conference, Peatlands in Partnership, which is jointly hosted and supported by the IUCN UK Peatland Programme, More Life 2020 and Pennines Peat Life. My name is Paul Leadbitter. I work for the North Pennines AONB Partnership as Peatland Programme Manager and have been in that role for the past 16 years. In that time, and in my view, the peatland conservation world has gone from a loosely affiliated group of organizations working in relative isolation to a much more closely aligned and collaborative conservation machine. And many people at the conference this week played a part in that. Under the umbrella of the IUCN UK Peatland Programme and with recent collaborations with the United Nations Environment Programme's Global Peatland Initiative, we can say that we work from the local to the global level now. While there is still plenty of work to do, we have come a long way in 16 years, and we should reflect on that over this week. I have managed the Pennines Peat Life project over the past 4 years, and as our project draws to close next year, we are presenting some of our results today. I'd like to thank the delivery partners in the project, which are the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, the Forest of Bowland AONB, and all the staff that work on Pennines Peat Life, and in particular, my partner in crime at the Yorkshire Peat Partnership, Tim Tom. I'd also like to thank our funders, the Environment Agency, United Utilities, Yorkshire Water, Northumberland Water, and of course, the EU Life Programme. As the UK has chosen a new path recently, Pennines Peat Life and More Life 2020 will be among 2 of the last peatland projects that are being supported by the Life Programme. I would like to say thank you to the Life Programme for that support on behalf of us all. And personally, I'm grateful that I've been involved in a Life project. Today, and working in collaboration with our sister project, More Life 2020, we are happy to host day 2 of the conference. Today, you will hear from the EU Life Programme and other partners from across Europe telling us of their work. You will hear about the results from the 2 Pennines-based Life projects and also our afterlife plan for Pennines Peat Life and More Life 2020 with an update on the Great North Bog Initiative. Today we'll have 4 themes. We'll talk about building successful peatland partnerships. We'll discuss peatland restoration in action. We'll look at monitoring peatlands on a landscape scale. And we'll look at peatland restoration with reference to economics, financing mechanisms, and carbon. So please enjoy the day. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Sylvia Barova, who is going to speak to us about the EU Life Programme. Sylvia has over 20 years of experience in nature restoration and biodiversity conservation. After obtaining her MSc in molecular biology, she worked for 8 years as development director for the Bulgarian partner BirdLife International. In 2007, Sylvia moved to Brussels and worked for almost 10 years as a policy officer in the nature unit of DG Environment of the European Commission. For the past 2 years, Sylvia has been a project advisor in the Life Programme managed by the European Climate, Environment and Infrastructure Executive Agency. I would ask Sylvia to give her presentation now, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvia Barova, and I'm working in the Life Programme, EU Life Programme of the European Commission. And I'm very happy to be given the floor here to share what the EU Life Fund contributed to the conservation of peatlands across Europe. And I will also say a few words about particularly in the UK. So as you know, the EU Life Programme, it was created in 1992 together with the Habitats Directive, and it's the key European Fund for Nature Conservation. The programme has 4 sub-programmes now for this financial period, and then as a whole, it constitutes 100% contribution to the objectives of the European Green Deal. We have enhanced budget for this financial period, and then the enhanced budget is mainly for the nature and biodiversity projects. There are sub-programs of the program, sub-programs, which are nature and biodiversity, circular economy, quality of life, climate mitigation and adaptation, clean energy and transition. And the 2 most relevant are nature and biodiversity, but also climate mitigation and adaptation. And under this sub-program, we also financed quite a lot of peatland restoration projects. The activities that has been carried out through the LIFE with the financial support of the LIFE program were all kind of ranging from saving endangered EU species and habitats, identifying, managing the Natura 2000 network, boosting awareness about the EU nature legislation, but also about the knowledge of the value of nature for our society, economy, and our well-being, dealing with invasive alien species, reaching out to governments, civil societies, businesses, and many, many more. In terms of peatlands, the Habitats Directive protects 13 habitats, peatland habitats, so 12 my habitats, and also bog woodlands, and some 33,000 square kilometers of these 13 habitat types are protected in more than 8,700 Natura 2000 sites. This area represents roughly 24% of all remaining natural peatlands within the EU, and these are data for the EU 28 countries. On the pie chart, you can see also what's the coverage of the different peatland habitat types in the EU. As you know, every 6 years we take stock of how close we move towards achieving the favorable conservation status of all EU protected species and habitats. And the last report was published in 2020, taking stock of the data based on the data for the last 6 years, the period 2013-2018. And in terms of peatlands, it shows that only 10% of all peatland, of all the 13 peatland habitats are in a good conservation status. And this is the group of habitats which is kind of in the worst situation. We see that only that basically these areas in which the peatlands are in a good conservation status are mainly in remote areas, inaccessible areas with a very limited human pressures. Those are primarily in the Alpine, Boreal, and Macaronesian biogeographical regions. We also, at the same time with the State of Nature, published a report that took stock of what life has contributed for the conservation of conservation status of species and habitats since its beginning in the last 30 years. And we looked at the species and habitats, but also briefly to the Natura 2000 network, the implementation of EU invasive alien species regulation, and capacity building, combating wildlife crime, and so on and so on. This document, it's a bulk study, and this is a short brochure. They're available on our website. In terms of peatlands and life, so in the 30 years of its existence, life supported 363 projects dealing with peatlands, some of them primarily dealing with peatlands, some of them projects with a wider scope, but also addressing peatland restoration, and all the 13 habitats has been addressed by life projects. What these projects were doing, majority of them were implementing large-scale restoration of drained and degraded peatland habitats by deforestation, rewetting, closing ditches, woodland removal, combating invasive alien species, reestablishment of minor species. So that was the majority of the projects were dealing with that. So actually all were dealing with that, but some were also stressing of some other complementary elements. There's a lot has been done in terms of surveys and research on peatlands in the within the framework of LIFE project, and especially in the last years, we see new techniques that have been deployed, which really enhanced our knowledge and understanding about, apart from the distribution, but also the quality, the conditions, and so on in the peatland areas, and also helped a lot with the monitoring. LIFE is not a program that deals with research. We have another program, which is the Horizon Europe now for the new financial period, but compared to years ago, let's say a decade, 2 decades ago, now we see that a lot of projects are involving scientists as well. And this is really a win-win situation where scientists can really explore, use the data, and this helped a lot of research that boosted our knowledge. A lot of also publications in scientific journals. We all say publish, 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 because there is no need to reinvent the wheel. And shared knowledge is something that really helps a lot for others in order to build their projects, to do properly the activities, to see what works, what doesn't work. So in order to invest and being in the right things and being more efficient. Then a lot of innovation came from life projects, innovation in terms of management, innovation in terms of restoration, planting sphagnum, also using the materials like mowing molina, whatever, with different tools, and then also using the resource. And there is a lot of also across Europe some business created from that. Which from one hand helps restoring and management of peatlands, but also helps the owners to gain benefits from that. Life is the only program that also helps land purchase, and through Life, a very important plot of peatlands has been purchased, strategic plots, which either ensure the proper hydrology or plots that need to be consolidated in order to have a bigger impact. Then projects contributed immensely about the public awareness, education, and involving a lot of volunteers in restoration and management of peatlands. And this is very important in order to first ensure that people understand why this is done, to see peatlands in a different way, but also to discover the species, the richness. Now we see a lot of areas that people go and enjoy, discover, see and take care of the peatlands. A lot of information is available. We also from our side promote a lot of outcomes from the Life projects through social media, but also on the Life website there is a lot of information. And we have kind of a refreshed project database where you can find information about all project that has been supported through Life since the very beginning. In terms of UK, we took stock of what Life has supported in terms of peatlands, and we found out that there is a series of 24 projects that was focused on the restoration of blanket bogs and raised bogs, carried out since the beginning of the Life program. And thanks to this project, 170,000 hectares, and this is a data which is 2 years old, of degraded mires has been restored. I just here briefly mentioned a few which kind of had a big bulk of habitats, brought a big bulk of habitats restored, but also there are projects like a Pennine Peat Life that, apart from restoration, is also evaluate the appropriate restoration measures, actually, which is and techniques, and then also looking at the development and also showcasing the payments for ecosystem services, a mechanism in the Peatland code, and suggesting based on practical work on the ground, suggesting how the code could be amended in the way that it's more attractive for farmers. And all this information is very, very important. And with that, I would like to conclude that there is a lot of knowledge, information, experience, and a lot of inspiration brought through Life projects. And then now it's all up to you to upscale peatland restoration and reserve the situation. So in the next State of Nature report, we have an analysis about the situation of peatlands across Europe, and the situation is much better. So thank you very much for that, for your time and for listening, and I'm happy to take questions in follow-up questions and answer sessions at the end. If you want to know more, just consult the live website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Our next speaker is Rudy van Diggelen, University of Antwerp, an international mire conservation group. Rudy was born in the Netherlands, but now lives in Belgium, where he has worked at Antwerp University for the past 14 years. Rudy is an expert in the restoration of damaged ecosystems, notably heathlands, peatlands, and fens. He is the chair of the European chapter of the Society for Ecological Restoration, which is the international network of restoration professionals, and also for the past 10 years represents the International Mire Conservation Group at the European Commission. Welcome, Rudy.
Okay, thank you. You hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, people, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to have a possibility to give a presentation here. Unfortunately, not live, but instead of such boring screen, but you have to do with that. The role of landscape in peatland recovery. I should have said maybe the role of landscape hydrology. Before I come to that, I want to show you some facts. Why doesn't it work? Why doesn't? Sorry, my excuse. First of all, some facts. In Europe as a whole, we have roughly 600,000 square kilometers of peatland. Half of it is undrained. 275,000 square kilometers has been drained. To give you an impression what it means, it's a bit more than the size of the UK. 75,000 square kilometers have completely gone, half of England. 2,000 square kilometers have been restored, a county. If you put it in perspective, you see a nice background that was made by the European Environmental Agency some 8 or 10 years ago, where they tried to depict the human impact, the environmental impact on the landscape, especially by urbanization and transport, where red means a lot of impact and greens means much less impact and white in between. Well, you can guess where I live, here in the middle of the most reddish part of all. If you plot the main peatland types on that, you will see this picture. Interestingly, the green part is mainly bogs, Scandinavia, Scotland, etc. If you go to the red part, it is mainly fens. So you can imagine which of the two main groups of mire types has suffered most. To give you a bit of just a figure, we analyzed the decrease of peatlands, of fens in the northern part of Belgium, Flanders, the Dutch-speaking part, since the Second World War, and we lost 95%. If we would have gone back to medieval time, we would have lost 99.9% or something like that. So quite a lot. So we need to restore them. Sylvia already said it as well. What she also said is restoration is re-wetting. A drained peatland should be re-wetted. Here you see a picture from my colleague Hans Joosten from Germany that he took in Belarusia, and you see with very simple techniques, people are trying to restore this bog. And they succeed in it, they get a water table. Well, I don't know if they succeed in restoration of the peatland, but anyway, they get a water table, they re-wet it. They get it higher, 20, 30 centimeters. However, this is also something we see a lot. This is a picture from South Africa, taken by my colleague Ab Grootjans, who is also a peatland ecologist. Some of you may know him. And at this site, people tried to restore groundwater-fed peatland, a fen. Obviously, they did not succeed because it's dry as it can be. And Ab said, and I fully agree with that, when there is a problem, analyze possible causes first. If you do not understand the functioning of the system, do not jump to restoration, or what is called restoration, because you might add to the problem. Just to give you one example, last week I was in a nature reserve along the border of Belgium and Germany, groundwater-fed fen, and There they had planted trees around the area had problems, and they had planted trees around the area to avoid evapotranspiration, to break the wind. They had done that about 20, 30 years ago because they thought it was good. Well, needless to say, that increases the problem, it enlarges the problem. Looking at the fan, if you want to analyze how it functions, you have to look at an undisturbed fan. Here you see an aerial picture of one of the most, I think the most, but anyway, one of the most undisturbed fans in Central Europe, Ruurd Valley in northeastern Poland. And I want to bring your attention to some things that you see here. First of all, you see that large part of this fan area, this is 1 kilometer wide or so and a few kilometers long. Large parts of this fan area are free from woodland. And this is not a managed fan. This is the situation how it has been at least since the Second World War and probably much longer. So this fen is open by itself. This is not managed. This is not mown. This is not grazed. Anyway, not in a large density. Of course, there's some elks, etc. But it's open. So what we see now in our fens covered by elderwoods, that's not the natural situation. This is the natural situation. Elderwoods are along the edge here, and on the dry ground, the spruce forest here. The fen is open, and only at islands, sand islands, mineral islands in the fen area and along the river where the water table is somewhat more dynamic, you see woodland, and you see also reed. And if you put it in a scheme, it's something like this. Along the edge, you get elderwood, then you get the broad zone with moss sedge, very open vegetation. This is where the orchids are, then the large sedges, and then the reedland. And the reedland and partly the large sedges are flooded every now and then. The elder woodland is fed by groundwater, but not high intensity. And the central part, the small sedges and the large sedge zone are fed by groundwater. Now, you may say that is very nice, but that is, of course, northeastern Poland, and we're now living in Western Europe, and we hardly have these types of fen. So then we go to this. This is an analysis we did some 15, 20 years ago in modified fen in Germany, in northern Germany, where you have essentially reed beds in the southern part of the area, and more along the edges you have woodland. And this was done by one of my master students at that time, Anja Hazenkamp. She's now fraction leader of one of a small fraction in the Euro Parliament, so you see where peatland studies can get you. But what she found was elderwood peat along the edges, sedge moss peat more in the center of the area, where there's now woodland, and reed peat and large sedge peat closer to the river. So exactly the same zonation that you find also in the undisturbed fen system. Sorry. So what it means is that such systems are lying in a spatial context. Here you see part of the outline of the Biebsha region, the largest lowland fen in Central Europe of about 600 square kilometers. The outlines, the gray lines, show the edge of the national park and the edge of the peatland. But this system can only exist because there is a huge system with groundwater that fuels this system. If this stuff at the right was not there, the stuff at the left, the peatland would not have been there. Now, what happens if you manipulate this hydrology shows this example. This is the oldest nature reserve of the northern part of Flanders, the Segge. It is the remnant of a large peatland. What you see here is an elevation map with white the highest and blue the lowest. You see at the bottom right corner, you see the mineral soil. You see at the top left corner, you see the river. So you see a gradient from high to low. That used to be a large peatland. And unfortunately, in the 1950s, they decided to create a grassland area between the ridge and the river. and they drained it by a pumping station. You see it on the map. In Y circle is where they left the nature reserve. Now, what happens then is this. This is an example of the Netherlands, but it could have been exactly the same in the Desert. You have a polder around such an area, which is drained, so the water levels are much lower. What it means is that the groundwater wells up in the polder, and much less in the nature reserve. What the managers try to do is to keep the nature reserve wet, so they pump water out of the polder, which is actually quite clean in this example. They pump it in the nature reserve and put it in ditches, small rivulets, and whatever you have there to keep the area wet. Now, what happens immediately, you see it from the arrows, is that the water goes into the ditches and then immediately goes down. So you create some kind of circular movement. Along the edges of such a reserve, you get desiccation. It is simply drained. You cannot keep that wet. But in the center of the area, you can keep it wet. Only you don't have the groundwater there because it simply cannot enter there because it goes downward. So what you get instead is that you keep it wet with infiltrating rainwater. And that means that in the long run, you get acidification. And the long run means some tens of years. You see a vegetation map, excuse it's in Dutch, from the 1950s. You cannot see all the colors, doesn't matter. But what I want you to draw your attention to is purple and red, which is actually groundwater-fed vegetation, 6230, if I remember well, habitat type. Orange is some intermediate type, and yellow is acid mire. You see hardly any acid mire, you see a bit of intermediate type and a lot of red and purple. Now, if you go there in 1989, when we did our mapping, you see the red has almost completely gone. Purple is no longer there. Orange is there quite a bit, and also yellow. So this area has been shifted from a fen to some kind of bog vegetation in about 30 years. And not because of natural succession, but because of the hydrology around it. Another example is this one. This is the area of the Drentse A in the northern Netherlands. The river and the peatland is more or less between the, I cannot point, can I? No. Yes, I can. The peatland is between the roads, more or less. So here, this is the peatland, and that is the reserve. Around it, here you have arable fields, and here a large heathland. And this reserve is 50, 60 square kilometers. This is only a section of it. Now, the reserve used to be used as wet meadows with kalta and this type of species. And the managers decided to try to convert it back into a living peatland again. So for that, they filled up all the ditches that were in the area. Here in blue, they filled up hundreds of ditches. This costed millions. And they finished that about 3-4 years ago. Question is did it work? Yes, it worked. What you see here at the left is a small section here in green, where orange is upwelling groundwater with upward flow of 8 to 10 millimeters a day, which is a lot. And so you see they got that back. So that functioned. Unfortunately, the hydrology at landscape level was also a bit disturbed. What it means, these ditches not only drained the peatland, they also transported the how you could call it, the discharge water from the arable fields, where with a lot of nutrients in it. So what happens now? If you close the ditches, the area is flooded with this water in the wet season. So, and instead of getting here a groundwater-fed fen, you get now more and more taifa that is invading this area. Highly productive taifa plants, taifa vegetation. Actually, probably increasing greenhouse gas emissions. We are measuring that at this very moment together with our friends from the University of Vienna. So I come to my take-home message. First of all, you should realize that fens depend on their water supply on the landscape around it. So you have to do something in the landscape around it. You should not keep only to the fen itself. they are complex ecological and hydrological gradients. So just simply blocking the outflow and thinking that is it is not sufficient. If you neglect these complex relationships, you can get unexpected and unwanted effects. Just I gave you two examples of that. I could have given you 20. And finally, and I think that's the most important lesson of all, analyze a system well before you start manipulating. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rudy. Okay, so those are the two presentations we have in this session. What I will do now is open up the floor to questions, and you know how to do that. And I have some questions before me already. So the first one looks like one for Sylvia, perhaps Rudy as well, but is there still a role for knowledge exchange between the UK and EU LIFE projects going forward? Sylvia,
yes,
do you want to start?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, hi, of course, definitely. And I must say that, okay, from what I have seen, like projects dealing on peatland habitat, mainly UK is far more advanced, but it's also because there is, let's say, more tradition when we have seen how many projects have been implemented, but also a lot of scientists that are involved now and so on, and you know much better than me. And what we do and what I personally do with the projects that I'm following, I kind of created a group between them. And whenever I find this information coming from reports or publications in scientific articles or in grey literature reports, I share between all of them. And also what we also try to do is kind of organize regular meetings in different formats and forums, and invite all ongoing projects. That's definitely, and I think that's what should be done, definitely. So yes, we all know nature doesn't know boundaries, and experience should be shared widely. So I do invite all of you working on the issue, please do share information and seek for partners and look for other projects that are ongoing, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Great, thank you. I would echo that as well. From my organization's point of view, the North Pennines AONB partnership, we do and will continue to reach out to our EU partners, whether or not we are in the EU anymore. We have to be able to do things like that moving forward. Okay, next question is for Rudy, and it says, do you see a role for continued agriculture compatibility with healthy fen restoration and management?
It's an interesting question. Yes, of course, there is a role. There are two options. There are two options, I think. One of them is in the infiltration areas. I already showed you this last example where the polluted water was entering the system. Well, there's nothing against agriculture on the infiltration area. However, on the condition that it should be clean. It should not get rid of its nitrate and ammonium via the surface water. That's one thing. The other thing is we realize as IMCG, we realize very well that farmers have lived and do live on peatlands. However, they produce the things that lead to the breakdown of the peat soil. And that should stop, amongst others, for climate reasons. At this very moment in different countries, including the UK, there are smaller and larger initiatives for so-called polludiculture, which are attempts to try to have agriculture on re-wetted peatlands. Re-wetted means re-wetted to the brim. So really wetlands with the water level at zero, not -40 or -60 instead of -80, no, zero. Even then, you can produce certain things. This typha was an example. It is used on an experimental scale still for isolating stuff, and actually works quite well. There are sphagnum farms to replace the sphagnum that is used, that peat is now used in horticulture, etc., etc. So there are possibilities, but it needs imagination and it needs will.
Great, thank you. Okay, one for Sylvia. What do you think is needed to upscale peatland restoration and conservation across Europe? EU life has made a difference, what is needed to complement or increase the impact?
Yes, yes. First and foremost is sharing all this information and inspiring others, and show that yes, it can work. It might take for Peatlands a long time, but it can work. So that's one. Then the second one is financing, and now there are more possibilities for financing also through some of other programs. There is also kind of a private foundation that starts seeing that yes, that's where I should invest, because it's good for nature, it's good for climate, it's good for our future. And of course, there is a political will. And what we have seen now in the new biodiversity strategy is that it is kind of a several priorities that kind of opens up the financing, but also there is a political commitment for kind of investing in the restoration in habitat types and ecosystems, which are also very much climate related, like peatlands and wetlands and so on. So I personally, that's my personal view, it's the momentum, and this momentum should be used because it is on the political agenda, and we don't know what might happen later on. And we also, in terms of restoration, you know, what we also see with this pandemic, that just, you know, a small tiny virus put the whole world on, I mean, to stop in a way, is that we do need to restore nature, and we do need to restore the balance, because otherwise, yeah, we'll see that again and again, and probably in a bigger scales.
Maybe I can add a bit to that, Paul.
Please do, yes, please do.
Yes, what I see in the countries I work in, which is at the moment mainly Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium, is that there is a political will. Yes, the other one is the stick, and the stick, an important stick, is LULUCF, land use and land use changes in forestry, because countries have to report on that. When is it? 22, I think. Will be the first serious report. And then they suddenly discovered that peatlands are emitting greenhouse gases. The larger public, well, hardly knows that. Some governmental officials do know it, and now the whole government knows it, because they think, hey, we ratified the Paris Treaty. We're going to zero in 2050, and now we have to report LULUCF. How much do our peatlands emit? And that's quite a lot, actually. So I think that's a very important thing now for making the governments, anyway in the countries I'm working, for making governments move and thinking about alternatives.
Great. Okay, thank you. Here's one that actually I'm quite interested in. It's probably for Rudy, but are there any examples of unmodified or near natural fens in Western Europe?
That's an interesting one. Yes, when we did one of our studies, pan-European study some years ago, the Polish said to me, we compared undisturbed and disturbed fens, and the Polish said to me, we do the undisturbed fence and you do the disturbed fence. I said, wait a moment, we want to have a geographical gradient in it. And I must say there are very few undisturbed fens in Northwestern Europe, to my taste. We do have a few, but they're all minor. They are small ones. I know some in Belgium. I know some in Germany. I don't know anyone in the Netherlands, but they're very, very minor. So the answer to the question is a bit double. At the scale that I showed you in northeastern Poland, no, we don't have them. At the scale of 1, 2, 3 hectares, yes, we have them. We have the vegetation community, we have the functioning peatlands, and we have them more or less undisturbed. Not in the state that it's totally undisturbed. We always have landscape, I would call it slightly disturbed landscapes, even if it is a woodland. But to some degree there are, yes.
Okay. Great.
But I invite you to visit them and write me, and we can organize an excursion, Paul.
There we go. Thank you. I've got a few more then. This is an interesting one. I run into this all the time with my team, and the idea that's of competing interests. So the question is, when thinking about wetland restoration on a landscape scale, how are conversations about competing land uses best approached with both landowners and policymakers? I think that's a question for both of you, please.
Okay, that's what, I'll take the floor first, but that's what every single life project, finance project, a conservation project is dealing with. Because Europe is a very densely populated continent, we all the time, have the issue with the land and for what the land to be used and so on and so on. But what we also see is that basically when people sit on the table and then start to talk about and discuss issues, solutions are found. And I kind of hardly can come to any example in which there is very acute kind of a conflict at the beginning, especially with landowners and people that are using their land for their living and so on, where at the end there is no, let's say, balanced solution found where everyone can benefit. And that's what somehow we should all kind of not underestimate, that a lot of things that are happening and a lot of missed opportunities are there because there is no proper conservation about the bigger picture and the longer term picture. And we all know that there's a lot of things that sometimes subsidies, they go in the right, not in the right direction, in the wrong direction, and so on and so on. But that's why things should be discussed, and that's the most important. Things should be discussed with the aim to find common ground. And I can hardly imagine someone that wants to make, kind of a harm to nature. It's just that, sometimes the situation is like that, things are not discussed and solutions are not found. But I thought recently for another conference to give an example where, there is no kind of a win-win solution that was found. And I can hardly, came with any.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rudy, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, well, I hardly can agree more with Sylvia than her answer. What I see in reality, if you talk to landowners, which is most of the time is farmers, at an individual level, you can perfectly talk to them, and you have to realize that these people have often no alternatives. So you must find alternatives for them. Where I see the main problem is at the organizational level, where they have a policy, and the policy says, for instance, says we want to have whatever. We're not going to accept this and this, or this type of things. These are fixed things. At the individual level, you always find solution. In concrete situation, you always can also find solution. The point is, it may take a lot of time. Because these people have to find alternatives, and it may take a lot of money because, if you go to Scotland or parts of Eastern Europe, probably the ground is very cheap. If you talk here in Western Europe, a hectare of land is somewhere between 50 and 100,000 euros farmland. What it means is these people, if they have to leave their ground, you're talking about huge amounts of money that someone has to pay. So it's not only willingness, it's also we must have financial resources for that.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got 1 minute left, and I have another question, which is slightly different. And that is, why do you think, both of you, why have peatlands been overlooked so long in terms of their importance to people? So this is idea that peatlands are, wetlands, and they're not nice places to be. Do you have any ideas as to why that has happened over the past centuries? Why peatlands?
Sylvia, shall I start?
I don't know why peatlands. Actually, because peatlands were used a lot, and somehow, I don't know, people somehow had more appreciation. When you say a forest, or if you say, flowering meadow or something like that, somehow people, for people, this is, the place that they want to be, because probably they don't see the peatlands, or they have seen the peatlands differently. And I think that is changing, especially what we see is that really, when you explain the role of peatlands as an ecosystem, the animals that they can see there in nice restored peatlands and so on and so on. I think this is changing a lot. So yes, probably because of that. I don't know, but Rudy, I come from Bulgaria and we hardly have any peatlands there. So probably Rudy is best placed to say more about that, but that's what I think.
We sunk into peat. Well, it had a bad reputation all over Northwestern Europe. If you look into languages, you see that very clearly.
Yeah.
Even the previous American president was talking about clean up the swamp.
Yeah. Yes.
He did not mean to restore the peatland. I mean that gives it, and of course it has to do with if you're living in such a peatland, it is a hard life. I mean, you can be flooded all the time, and et cetera, And at a certain moment, people started to use them to get turf out of it, but also to put their waste in it. You cannot imagine how many peatlands we find waste deposits, former waste deposits, sometimes centuries old, sometimes very recently. It was worthless ground. You could not grow anything on it. It was dangerous, and that was it, more or less.
So it's interesting too, because peatlands are often called the Cinderella habitat that was mentioned yesterday. Yep. They are uncharismatic, unsexy, whatever you want to say. But I mean, as Sylvia said, the times have changed, and I think the age of peatlands is here, isn't it, in terms of what they do for us. Okay, well, I think that's our time now. So I want to thank Rudy and Sylvia for the presentations and everybody else for the questions. And we now have a comfort break for the next till 10:35. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.